The willow tree in the corner of the high school campus was more than just a landmark for Claire and Lucas. It was their place. From the moment they met in freshman year, they'd claimed it as their own, escaping to its shade during lunch breaks, study sessions, and those moments when life felt too heavy for either of them to bear. Claire was the dreamer, with notebooks full of poetry and sketches of faraway places. Lucas, her steady anchor, would listen intently, offering his quiet but unwavering support. They never said it aloud, but their bond was something rare, something almost sacred. But by junior year, everything changed. It started subtly. Lucas began spending more time with Natalie, the new girl who seemed to draw everyone in with her effortless charm. At first, Claire didn't mind. Lucas was allowed to have other friends. But then came the day she dreaded, a day she hadn't prepared for. Claire arrived at the willow tree to find Lucas already there, laughing with Natalie. The way he looked at her was different, a look Claire had once secretly imagined was meant for her. "Hey, Claire," Lucas said, waving her over. His voice was as warm as ever, but Claire felt the shift. Natalie turned and smiled, her beauty as intimidating as her presence. "Lucas was just telling me about your poetry. He says you're amazing." Claire forced a smile, her heart cracking with every second she stood there. "Thanks," she said quietly, sitting down but feeling like a stranger in her own sanctuary. The weeks that followed were unbearable. Lucas and Natalie became inseparable, and Claire, once his closest confidant, felt like she was fading into the background. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter, but every stolen glance and shared laugh between them was a knife to her heart. One evening, after a school event, Claire found herself under the willow tree alone. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her notebook, pouring her pain into words she'd never say aloud. "Claire's?" She looked up to see Lucas standing there, concern etched on his face. "What are you doing here?" she asked, wiping her cheeks hastily. "I could ask you the same," he said, sitting down beside her. "You've been avoiding me." Her laugh was bitter. "Avoiding you? You're the one who's been too busy with Natalie to notice I exist." "That's not fair," he said, his voice defensive. "You know you're important to me." "Am I?" she snapped, her voice breaking. "Because it doesn't feel that way anymore, Lucas. It feels like I've been replaced." He stared at her, stunned. "Claire, No, let me finish," she interrupted, her emotions spilling over. "I've been in love with you for years, Lucas. And I never said anything because I was scared it would ruin what we had. But now I've lost you anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it, his expression torn. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "How could you?" Claire said, standing up. "You've been too busy looking at her to see me." She walked away, leaving him under the willow tree with her words ringing in his ears. The weeks that followed were a blur of avoidance and heartache. Claire buried herself in her art, channeling her pain into something she could control. Lucas tried to reach out, but she ignored him, refusing to reopen the wound. Then, one day, she found a note slipped into her locker. "Meet me at the willow tree, please." Against her better judgment, she went. Lucas was there, pacing nervously, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Hey," he said softly when she approached. "What do you want, Lucas?" she asked, her voice weary. He took a deep breath. "I messed up, Claire. I didn't see it. I didn't see you. And I'm sorry." She crossed her arms, her guard firmly in place. "Why are you telling me this now? What about Natalie's?"
"She's not you," he said simply.
"I liked her, but it wasn't what I thought it was. And being with her made me realize how much I needed you. How much I've always needed you." Claire's heart wavered, but the pain was still fresh. "You can't just say that and expect everything to go back to the way it was." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "But I'm willing to fight for us, Claire. If you'll let me." She looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity, and found it there, raw and unguarded. "Lucas," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "You broke my heart. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you," he said, his voice steady. "If you'll let me." The willow tree swayed gently above them, its branches whispering secrets of forgiveness. Claire took a shaky breath, her walls beginning to crumble. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling. "One day at a time." Lucas smiled, reaching for her hand. And under the willow tree, they found a way to begin again, stronger than before.